I just want to remind folks that starting this fall, we've been doing more of these sort of pre-council meetings to provide the public an opportunity to hear from different organizations or individuals. We did one with PEPCO, County Council Member Tom Hucker. We did one with Congressman Jamie Raskin and the U.S. Postal Service. Last week we had Montgomery College here, and now we are lucky to have folks from SDAT here with us this evening. And so we really appreciate it. Our goal here is to enable a bit more interaction and not just have people come in and give a formal presentation to the City Council. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Grisby now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight's discussion with our representatives from the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation Office in Montgomery County. We had asked them to do kind of a tax assessment 101. We all know that the tax assessments were redone in Tacoma Park about this time last year. They kicked in for 2019. And so this isn't a question about what's happening in the immediate future. It's kind of how their process works, how individuals intersect with that, and how we can understand it better. So I'd like to introduce Marie Green, who's Supervisor of Assessments, and Ava McIntyre Garvey, who's Assessor Manager. They're both with SDAT. It's the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, and they're based in Montgomery County. Thank you. Oh, and excuse me, just as a note, we have note cards and pencils for written questions. If people would like some, I have some I can hand out. They're at both doors. And then we'll take questions after the presentation.
Is there like a clicking?
Yeah,
thing
she
to-
said her it is.
Okay, and you just press this button to go to the next slide? Okay, so,
Do you want to get over here where you can see it and read it, or you want to go look?
here's fine.
Okay. Ava is going to actually do the presentation to save my voice for the question and answers, because I know you're going to have some. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Ava actually is our commercial manager in our department, so she's big time on that area. And I would go over the overview of anything within the SDAT.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone. So I'm gonna run through our presentation here, and Marie will take the questions and answers. So first slide, this is the overview of the real property assessment process. So, the Department of Assessments and Taxation was created in 1959 to replace the Maryland Tax Commission. Back then, every county had its own assessment office. The assessments were done by the county, and there was no real uniformity. Every county just sort of did what they wanted to do. So in 1975, the state assumed the assessment function and sort of streamlined the process.
Moving.
Okay, all right. So the reasons the state assumed the assessment function, uniformity, assessment levels, exemptions, public confidence. Uniformity is having a methodology that is a similar way of valuing properties. Oh, okay. Assessment levels. That is, you know, we assess properties at 100% of market value. That's our current assessment levels. Before, each county used to do their own thing. Exemptions, there's an application for exemptions. There's charitable exemptions, religious exemptions, fraternal exemptions, and you have to apply through, you have to fill out an application, and the supervisor of assessments reviews it and makes a determination. And then public confidence. I'm guessing that means that the public had confidence when the when everything's under a state umbrella with a sort of a, what am I trying to say? With a methodology for doing things where you're not just sort of doing things sort of haphazardly. So the department is structured as a real property, the real property division. There's the headquarters staff. It's located in Preston Street in Baltimore, and there are 24 local offices, 23 counties, and the city of Baltimore. There's also taxpayer services that are more of a business personal property type function. So there's personal property appraisal. That's everything that isn't like real property, like buildings and land, that sort of thing, like fixtures, like these chairs and this podium, personal property. Railroad and utility valuation, franchise tax administration, charter, and UCC and tax credits. Those are all divisions in our department. What is that? Sorry, it doesn't like me. I have to click it like. Oh, yes, you can. Thank you. Okay, so this is a map of the state of Maryland with all the counties and county seats labeled there.
I think in the State Department assessment with the counties, we're also broken up into 3 different groups. You have what you call the A counties, and you have what you call the B counties, and you have what you call C counties. Montgomery, as you know, will be an A county.
Yeah.
And there's only 5 of them. And of the 5, the super county is Montgomery. And then the other 4 is Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, Baltimore County, and then we have Baltimore City is included in those 5 for the A's.
Yeah, and all of the assessment offices are located in each county seat. The assessor, so Maryland has 2.3 million property accounts. Approximately a third of the properties are valued yearly. And Tacoma Park is in the group that was reassessed as of January 1, 2019, and it'll be reassessed again 3 years in 2022. So there are 3 groups. Group 1, GO 80, that's the group that Tacoma Park is in. Group 2 is the group that we just finished working on, and those assessment notices will go out at the end of December for the January 1st, 2020 date of finality. That's the effective date of the assessment. And then Group 3 will be next year, January 1st, 2021. Approaches used to estimate market value. So there's a cost approach, an income approach, a market approach. Cost approach is information that we use the Marshall and Swift manual of to come up with rates to value mostly residential properties, but some commercial properties are valued on the cost approach also. Income is what's most typically used to value commercial properties, and then the market approach is used for residential and commercial property. Really, the cost and income approach are kind of a hybrid. There's a hybrid. The market approach is involved in every approach, really, because there are multipliers that you apply to cost figures to get to a market figure. And the same thing with income. There are multipliers that are based on the market that you apply to get to a market value. The assessor.
The cost approach actually is evaluation of the building and the land. And it's basically on the replacement of the building with the land and subtracting out depreciation. And that's how we determine the cost approach. Where the income approach is basically where it's least income from properties, mostly like apartments and commercial buildings, rentals, stuff like that. And whereas the market approach is basically the sales. So we're using the sales of around surrounding properties that's similar to what we are valuing. So we use those in determining valuation.
So types of property types. Residential properties are single-family homes, townhomes, condominiums, and commercial properties include office, retail, warehouse, and apartments. And there are commercial condominiums too that we would use a market approach to value based on the sales of those types of properties. Assessing residential property, estimate of construction costs, estimate of land value, application of market value indicator, statistical validation with sale properties. Do you want to talk anything about residential?
Well, with the residential properties, we use the application of market value indicator, which we call MVI. Basically, what that is, it's the overall of using the sales of a typical market, because we use the cost as a replacement, so that only comes up to a certain amount. So you're looking at what the MVI brings it up by using it's an adjustment based on the sales in the area. And that's how we come up with the valuation. Another factor they have in there too, which is not even listed, is there is a cost rate, which is the state goes around every year and take analysis of what a builder's cost is for both the employees, the cost of materials, things like that, and they go around and they analyze all these different developers and builders throughout the state on their costs, and then we put it together and they come up with a cost index, and they use that with the replacement cost, and then on top of that, we use MVI.
Okay. Physical attributes collected for cost approach. The number of stories. Okay. Yeah, the number of stories, the size of the improvements, type of construction, quality of construction, type of heat, and other residential attributes. These are all things that go into the cost approach in order to get a value for mostly residential type properties. Do you want to say anything about that? Okay. Model and valuation. Models, similar characteristics, number of stories, quality of construction, style of construction. This is mostly residential, used for residential properties. The market value indicator, Marie talked about that. Statistical measure, International Association of Assessing Officers. They kind of set the standards that we use, to make sure that we do everything uniformly and sort of by the book. Say anything about that?
With the models, basically what they're saying in that situation is that's basically the sales. You're looking at the different types, and then you're coming up with the values based on these models. And then in saying that, those models will then bring you the market value indicator. That's basically what that's talking about. And in this statistical measure, we're talking about the IWO sets a guideline that we all have to go with, because it's a federal thing now, and they have us using this as our guideline across the United States. So it's an international assessing officers that what this program is. So they have a set guideline on the rules and regulations on how we determine the valuation, and we go with that. So all the assessors basically have college degrees, and then they have to take these courses that are mandated by the IAAO.
Owner notified of assessment value, the notice. So every 3 years, a third of the county gets reassessed. We send out an assessment notice. Value information is on that notice, the old value, the new value, both the land and building breakdown, appeal information, the deadlines for filing appeals, the different types of hearings. Basically, we offer telephone hearings, written hearings, and in-person hearings with the assessor. Other information, worksheet requests, sales listings. So basically, you can request your own worksheet whenever you appeal your property. You can also request the comparable property worksheets, like, if you want to just see how your neighbor's property is assessed, and everything that goes with that. And then the sales listings, basically a list of all the sales of the similar models or maybe all the models in your neighborhood. That's pretty much anything to add.
Just that in appealing, there's a cost for comparable worksheets. So it's like $2,
$1.
$1 a worksheet. So
Not for your own, just
not for your own,
comparables.
just for comparables. And you can only request comparables during an appeal. You can't just want to see, you can request your worksheet at any time, but you can't request comparable worksheets only if it's under an appeal, is when you can receive comparable worksheets.
Assessment phase-in. So increases are phased in over 3 years. So we chose 2016 and 2019 because Tacoma Park was reassessed in 2019, and before that, it was reassessed in 2016. So 2016 is the base year. So the increase would be phased in over 3 years. And in this example, the 2016 value was $100,000, and the new 2019 assessment was $130,000. So the tax bill would be based on what's called the taxable assessment, which is the same thing as the phase-in value for each of the 3 years. So in 2019, the taxable value is $110,000. In 2020, it's $120,000. In 2021, so it's at the full market value, and then it's reassessed again in 2022. If there are any decreases in value, then the taxable assessment or phase-in value remains the same for all 3 years. Anything? The assessment worksheet. So we pretty much went over this already. A property owner may obtain a copy of their worksheet from of their property at any time from their local office. So appealing your assessment. So at the first step, or the first level, is the supervisor's level. That's where you receive your assessment notice, and you fill it out and you send it in, or you do it online, because you can do that now. And you request a hearing. You let us know if you want it to be written or in person, or by telephone. Then we schedule the hearing. Or if it's a written appeal, then we review it and send the final assessment notice to you. And once you get your final assessment notice, you can, if you're still dissatisfied, you can go on to the second step, which is the Property Tax Assessment Appeal Board. They're independent from our office. Believe is it the county that appoints them? Yeah, the county appoints.
executive.
The county executive appoints those 3 board members. And they will hear your case, and the assessment office will give their side of the case, and they'll make a determination. And if you're still unhappy, then there's a third step, the Maryland Tax Court. You can represent yourself at that level as a property owner, or you can have an attorney. And it's more formal at that level. You would meet with the administrative judge and put on a case, and then they'll render a decision. That's the final level of appeal.
There is also another level, but it only deals with law, and that's circuit court. A lot of people think when they go to tax court and they still dissatisfied with their value, they think they can go on to circuit court. So they'll send, it costs, so they'll send their thing up to pledging they want to go through circuit court to appeal the assessment. But once they put in is for valuation, they'll automatically deny it. They only take cases that deals with law, not with valuation.
Assessing commercial property. So there's the manual, the Marshall and Swift valuation cost method, land value estimate, sales comparison check, application of the income approach when appropriate. So I mentioned before that Marshall and Swift was a cost manual that we use. We don't actually look through the manual, but the amounts are built into our computer program that we use. So we enter all the pertinent information, square footage, leasable square footage, and we apply our market multipliers that I mentioned before, such as capitalization rate. We put in vacancy amounts and expenses, and generate a market value based upon the rental income. Sorry, this is all based on rental income. So, and also I mentioned that we sometimes use the cost approach for certain commercial properties. Churches and schools are considered commercial property, and it wouldn't be appropriate to apply an income approach to a church or a school, so we use a cost approach for that. Reevaluation required. Valuation out of cycle. So I mentioned every 3 years, a third of the county is reassessed, and you get an assessment notice. But there's also assessments out of cycle. So whenever there's a zoning classification change at the owner's request, the department can reassess at that time. If there's a change in use or character, then we can also reassess for that. And if there's a substantially completed new construction, which adds at least $100,000 in property value, we also send out a notice for that. Erroneous calculations or measurements, we may or may not send a notice for that. We can, there's ways to correct an error without having to send out a notice, but we could send a notice for that. Rezone property pursuant to property tax article section 8-226. And when a subdivision occurs, subdivision is whenever the owner, at the owner's expense, they file a record plat changing the size or legal description or anything about their property, then we would also send out an out-of-cycle notice for that kind of change as well. Use assessments. So there are special use assessments which these properties would have the benefit of a lower than market value. An agricultural use assessment is one of them for farms. Woodland management programs for people who put their woodlands into an agreement that they will not develop it for a certain period of time, or that you can't develop it at all. And then there's golf clubs and country club use agreements, and low-income tax credits for apartment properties. I think only apartment properties. Mm-hmm. Okay. So those are the special use assessments. Other programs. So there's the homestead tax credit, the homeowner's tax credit, renter's tax credit, exemptions, enterprise zone credits. These are all credits that the homestead credit is what a property owner can get if their property value increases more than 10% over the previous year. It's called a 10% cap, or the homestead tax credit. It limits the amount of the increase for taxable purposes to no more than 10% above the previous year's taxable assessment. So regardless of the market value is not limited, the market value can go up any percent that the market allows, but for taxing purposes, the homestead tax credit limits the increase in the taxable assessment to no more than 10% above the previous year's taxable assessment. And then there's the homeowner's tax credit program. You have to apply for that one. You apply to there's an office in Baltimore that handles that. It has specific guidelines, like income guidelines, and I believe your property value is limited to like $300,000 or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's limitations, and there's an application fee for that. And there's the renter's tax credit. The exemptions I mentioned before, different type of exemptions, you have to apply to the supervisor assessment for that. Enterprise zone credits is for businesses, yeah. As a benefit for businesses to develop in the area, they can receive this enterprise zone tax credit also.
Let me tell about the homestead credit.
Oh, homestead.
That one, let's make sure on that one. Okay, with the homestead tax credit, people get that really confused. With the homestead tax credit, Montgomery County has a 10% cap. I think we're one of the highest. More other counties in the state, it's around 3% and 4%. We're one of the highest at the 10% cap. People get that, they don't understand it. The 10% cap is only on your taxable base. It has nothing to do with your assessment. Because people say, well, you can't make my assessment go up higher than 10%. No. Your assessment can go up 50%, 150%. It's just your taxable base. When, as a matter of fact, that's the base they use, the county used for to determine your tax, for your tax rate. That's where the 10% cap comes into play. And because of that, there's a lot of people that come in, they get confused because the first thing they said, my taxes is this amount and my neighbor's is lower than mine. Well, yes, because it depends on your timing. So in other words, your neighbor may have been in their house and it's exactly like yours, but they've been in there 10 years. You just purchased your house, so you only been there 1 year. Therefore, that neighbor has been getting a 10% cap over the past 3 reassessment cycles, okay? Whereas you're just starting. So even though your assessment may be exactly the same, your tax bill is not going to be the same. It's because of that 10% cap. And the 10% cap begins from the time you purchase your house and how the value of the house go up. So if your house, let's say I bought it in 2010, and it was $100,000, and then 3 years down the road at 2013, it went to 150. You went up more than 10%. So you got a cap on the taxable base. Whereas by the time you get to 2016, it's now gone up $200,000. So you went up another 50% over. So you're going to go at your cap comes in play. At that same time, someone else came in and they bought their house and their assessment is at $200,000 and their tax bill is based on the $200,000, not on that 10% cap that was put on everybody else. And that's where a lot of people get very confused and start appealing their assessments based on their tax bill. It's not going to work because it depends on when you purchase your property.
Okay, we mentioned the county caps. So Marie mentioned Montgomery County is at 10%, which is the highest cap. And then there are, like Anne Arundel County has a 2% cap. Talbot County has 0% cap. So, Montgomery County is just at the highest. But the cap is a very good thing because without it, you would have no protection against increases, 50%, 75% increases. It would be really awful if you did not have this 10% cap. So the caps do not transfer. I think Marie was touching on that. Like it's for that specific homeowner. The next homeowner has to start over, and their cap, I believe you have to live in the property a full tax year. A full year before the cap would actually kick in on your property. So if you buy your property June 30th of this year, you have to wait until July 1 of next year before you get a cap. Of the following year. So if you bought the property on July 1 of this year, you would be eligible for the cap on July 1 of 2020. But if you bought it on June 30 of this year, you would have to wait until July 1, 2021. So because it has to be a full tax year. Let me see, with the sale of the property, the taxable assessment becomes the basis for the new buyer's property tax calculation. I think Marie already talked about that. Website information. Visit our website. It has a lot of good information on there if you ever want to know more about anything. That's it.
Thank you. On our website, in our local office, we basically handle real property. So the other tax credits and programs, they're handled in Baltimore. So people come in and be requested information, especially when it comes to businesses and personal property. We can take an application and send it up a hit for you, but other than that, we don't really do anything with the business entities and the personal property stuff. That's all handled in Baltimore. We just handle real property in all the local offices. The other thing is our hours has changed because before we used to be open to 5 o'clock. We now close at 4:30. So it's from 8 to 4:30 is the way the hours are now. But we do take walk-ins. You can walk in anytime if you have questions and someone will talk to you on whatever your questions is. So there's no problem with that. So I did receive one question. And this one is kind of it basically had to deal with what can do for low-income homeowners with disabilities. We really don't do much with the tax base. The tax bases deal with the county. All we do is just value the property for the county. The county determines the tax. The county also have their own tax credits for all different type of programs, and that's offered for both the low income and with people with disabilities. Yeah, the homeowner's tax, the state has one, which is the homeowner's tax credit, which you can use that, and you don't have to be disabled. It's based, and it's not low income, it's based on your income and the value of your property. And it's not really $300,000 based. I think, let's say, if your home is $800,000 and you're only receiving an income of maybe $25,000, you should apply for the homeowner's tax credit, because it will help you with your tax bill. It may not cover all of it, but it will do a percentage of it to lower it for you. And did you say you had others?
So okay, it's on. We've asked people to write down questions on cards, so we'll go around and collect them, and I can just read them out. And then also council members can ask questions. So Roz can collect the cards. So this is referencing one of the things that happened after the last assessment is that the patterns of assessments in Tacoma Park seemed a little strange, and we basically were flat. Our amount of money that we got was very tough as a city. About a third of our side of the city actually decreased in assessed value. And so it was something that caused a lot of concern by our council members and by our residents. This gentleman asks, notes, I have analyzed assessment data versus actual sales price for homes sold in Tacoma Park between December 2018 and May 2019. Graphing the results shows that as the sales price increases, so does the tax assessment discount. Why does the county have difficulty assessing more expensive homes? In other words, the more expensive the home, the greater the gap between the assessment and sales price. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, one of the things that didn't really talk much about is, is that process that you go through when you do the assessments in that time when all of Tacoma Park is assessed?
Montgomery County has basically about 400,000 accounts, and we assess about a third of those every year. We have about 15 assessors at this time. So based on the information that we receive, especially with Tacoma Park is one of our, tougher areas to deal with. And we have to actually basically do them uniformly as far as the type of construction, the age of construction, and locations. So what I have found, basically one of the managers that was handling the Tacoma Park area, where you're seeing this change, we don't value the expensive properties lesser. We value them high, what they are. But you got to remember, when they were built, as I was explaining, at the time of new construction, when we picked them up, they already are assessed at a higher value. But time we go to reassess it based on the market, though, because we use the market to determine those prices when they first built. So when those houses are now built, and the time they go to be reassessed, they already stabilizing in their market. So they may not go up as much as the older homes that's in the area, because a lot of people, based on the market, this is what I'm dealing with the real estate agents and everything, you be looking at the sales coming in, people say, well, I can't afford the newer homes that are bigger and more expensive. We're going for the more lower priced homes that's older, where we can go in and just renovate them. This is where the problem comes in for us, because we can't come inside the renovated properties, okay? some of the homeowners do help us by telling us they contact, well, you know, my neighbor had this, and done, and we can't tell that. All we can tell is by what we see on the outside. If they do not you don't have to take out a permit to renovate if it's not changing the electrical and the plumbing. But you can go in and redo the whole kitchen and leave everything the same, the electrical and the plumbing in the same place. But that house now is probably worth more money. But how are we to know as the assessors? Because we can't come in and there's no permit that's been taken out. The only time we know there's been a change on some of those older homes is they took out a permit to add, or they're going to change in the plumbing and electrical. And that's how we catch it. Only other ways we can catch it is when they actually go up for sale. And when they go up for sale, then they come out on MLS. The other issue we had, which the federal government has just now placed a new law on, was MLS. MLS is the multiple listing sales. Well, real estate agents at the time when a house comes on the market do not have to list it on the multiple listing sales. They can just sell it as is. They don't have to list it at all. The federal government has just, and that doesn't help us, because if a house has been renovated and a real estate agent put it on the market, he did not put it on multiple listings, so we didn't know. That's the only way we can actually find out that it has been renovated and changed. But the federal government now has passed a new law and saying that every home, we don't care what it is, has to be put on the multiple listing sales, which would now help us to determine renovated properties. That is our biggest issue when it comes to older homes and to the newer ones.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. So I think I want to piggyback off of that prior question. So the city is assessed at the same time. So I guess my question is kind of twofold. One, it's that typical in Montgomery County to assess an entire municipality at the same time? And
Yes.
two, what do you do to verify or validate the assessor's work? So, for example, in the city, if you mentioned you only have about 15 assessors, and we see some variation because everyone's assessed at the same time. We all kind of know what we have. We all see the houses sell it, and we know what they went for. And yet, my tax bill went up, your tax bill went down. We kind of see some variation. What do you all do to kind of gut check yourselves when you're going through the process of evaluating an entire city?
Well, and we definitely will do it. Tacoma Park, it depends on how is it the county has broken you up for the geo code. In other words, they put the districts how they break them up for each geo. Well, but Tacoma Park, all of it is in one geo code. So it's usually 1 to 2 people who's going to assess Tacoma Park. It's not like the whole group. A long time ago when we did everything by hand and we had 90 assessors when I first started, we came out as a team. The other issue is the assessors are now, it's hard for them to really come out. They're only looking at the sales. This is where the issue is coming. They're only looking at the sales and permits when they're coming out at this time. They try to pick up stuff that's not has a permit or sales, but you all are really, of all the jurisdictions, are very diligent on people doing any building and without a permit. You make sure they have one, because you will definitely close them down. I know that for a fact. So that is not the biggest issue for them. And usually it's the same too over time. It's not like we put a brand new one, but lately, based on the turnover I'm having, there has been different ones coming in. But like I said, we basically are looking at the sales and permitting when they're coming out to do the assessment. The only other way they can look at stuff is if someone had called and request, and you need to come out and look at my property, or they said, the house down the street, you did not see it, and compare that. Now, we have 2 different teams. There is a team who picks up only new construction. So that group will come out and do just the new construction part, and then you had the team who's just doing the residential area. And then there's another team who's just doing the commercial part of the area.
Okay, so I know he wants.
So because we also, I didn't ask about commercial because we noticed differences with commercial property assessments as well. So I guess, again, you know, I'm trying to figure out, is there not an audit that you all do internally? Is there?
Yes.
Because we may have commercial properties that are directly adjoining to some degree residential properties. And if you see commercial go up through the roof, some residential go down, some residential go up, it's kind of difficult for residents to understand what's happening. And I guess my question is, how are you all ensuring consistency, especially if it's only one or two assessors?
Well, that team is underneath a supervisor and a manager. Believe me, it is checked 5 times every jurisdiction, because even though the assessor the supervisors check, and then there's a manager check. When we by us going into the technology age is in a computer, everything, once you go in, it is, first of all, when that stuff is inputted, there's another team of people who all they do is check on when we do the inputs, errors, how you input it, to the point that the ratios, if these ratios are out of line, let's say you had a cell that was this amount and the ratio was should have been maybe no higher than 100%, and it went up to 175. That is a big check mark. And once the manager has done whatever, there's another team, which is, well, like myself and my area supervisor. We have to actually go in and do a checkpoint on every property that we just assessed. And there's a ratio thing. So I'm going through constantly checking to see any outliers of these ratios that's out of whack. Either they're too low or they're too high. And if they are, we then send these people back out again to check these properties to see what the problem is. If they can't find it, then other things is we start going back to permitting, and we would leave a card and have the owner, can you please contact us? Because we want to know there is a problem and we're trying to figure out what it is. But these assessors, like I said, even though it's a turnover, these area supervisors are on it, because this stuff comes out weekly with these ratio checks. And then at the end, like right now, this is our end for the 2020 assessment, the area supervisors, which are higher than I am in Baltimore, are now, all this stuff has just gone into things. Then they have like 7 counties apiece. It's like 4 of them. And what they do is they now are screening our stuff to see if any of these ratios are out of line. And I've already had him send back twice different little neighborhoods or townships that I see a problem. You need to review this. Maybe you need to readjust. You need to rework. It is completely audited, because after they finish, then the state auditors come in place and they come over and review all our work again. So like I said, it is checked constantly.
So following up on that, I'm going to show you, I'll give you these 2 maps. Each have, and she can put it up too. One of the things, and you know, we understand that we're not getting into specific properties or that kind of thing, but this map shows where assessment values went down and where they increased. And where they went down is more in the blue colors and that kind of thing. And so I know that this has been something that raised a lot of questions, and it may be something that you can describe how those things work. But I know Councilmember Kovar had a question.
Well, yeah, the question relates to both what Mr. Earl asked and my colleague, Councilwoman Searcy as well, and this map. So, and this gets back to the earlier slide about customer confidence or whatever the phrase was. And I think people look at this and they just don't have confidence, because this is no longer, at one point, I think 3 years ago, in our zip code, it was the fastest moving zip code in the whole greater DC area. When something went on the market, it was out within 6 to 7 days. We're still probably in the top 20, and from what I've seen and the data that we've looked at when we were doing this recent strategic plan on housing and economic development, which we just adopted, and we still have more work to do to implement it, we saw that average home prices are continuing to rise. So it's really hard to believe that something close to 30% of the homes saw decline, just knowing what the market's like now. And I would add, most people react to these kinds of things based on what happens to them personally. So I'm sitting here in a greenish area, and my home went up, a couple of percentage points. It's well below what I could sell it for. I can say that just based on who's next door, and my spouse probably doesn't want me to be saying something like this, but I don't know how it can be explained that there's that big a gap. And then this gets to what Mr. Earl was talking about, which is to the extent there's a gap, not in how much is paid, because if there's that 10% cap, we understand that you're only going to pay that amount, but there shouldn't be a massive gap between the assessed value and the market value. And it seems like there is, and I think that gets to people then starting to wonder, well, is something that's hard to explain happening here with the patterns and the trends of the data we're seeing?
Well, what we used, as I explained before, in this area, the Cone Park is very varied. So you have some pockets in areas that are a little bit on a depressed side. And then you got some pockets on the area that's not. The issue is, when we did these assessments, like I said, we had a large number of Cone Park come out and appeal their assessments. And a lot of those that came in and appealed their assessments were not valued very high. They had other issues with their properties, which we had already sold and had already marked them lower, but we made them even lower based on some of the issues that they had on their properties. As I stated, we have to uniformly use what sales that's coming into the area. Actually, at the same time, when we use the sales, we're using sales from a year to 3 years prior to the date of the finality. So at the time when we did, these sales were kind of high. After we do it, the sales can start dropping. But we can't do a change. We use the market based on the year prior, back from 1, 2 to 3 years. We're looking at a 3-year difference of sales. We don't just look at 1 year sales. We're looking at 3 years from the last time it was reassessed to determine the valuation. So if the market is jumping from that time period, there's nothing we can do at that time. We're using that market. And if the market starts changing right after we do it, it is already done. So that's when people come in and they start saying, well, we stopped using sales, for instance. We're reassessing now for January 1, 2020. So the sales data that we're using is basically 2018, 17, and 16. Very few of 2019 we get to use because our data has to be done by October 1st. So any sales that come in after October 1st, we can't use because it is done. So, and there's not a lot of sales usually around in the summertime for us to really be using because the market for most homes when they start selling, it's mostly in the spring, just before school is out. That's the biggest market we get. But for some reason in Montgomery County, the next time the market is big is right now. For some reason or another, it is crazy because all of a sudden I have thousands and thousands of transfers. As a matter of fact, Montgomery County probably had the most sales going on in the whole state. We usually get 1,000 transfers a day. A day. It has gotten so difficult for us to put this information. I have 4 other counties of clerical people helping us input the data. On top of that, the land records, which is a complete separate entity from us, they have a difficulty in getting the stuff to us in a reasonable time period. I may not get the data for 2 weeks, 3 weeks to a month. I had a homeowner calling, was complaining, saying that we didn't change their name on their property. Well, we checked land records. We didn't have the deed. We checked land records. They didn't have the deed. I had to contact that homeowner and state, look, you may have purchased your house 6 months ago, but your title attorney has not brought the information into land records to prove that you're now the new owner of this property. That's another issue we have. So we only use what we have. If the information is not there, we can't do anything about it. And that's what I'm saying. In Tacoma Park, when I was talking to the manager and the supervisor that was doing it back for 2019, she says, Marie, I don't know what to do. These sales are awfully kind of high that we're using, but what little sales I got coming in at this latter date is very low. But it's not enough of them to support with the amount that I had from the prior 3 years. And that's the qualm we have. Now, we have over time when out of cycle, I've had, well, when we had the big time of the foreclosure part time, Montgomery County did not really, we really weren't hurt with that big foreclosure period, which was 2017 and 2000, well, actually it was 16 and 15, was when they had the real bad foreclosure across the state, where Prince George was hit very hard. Montgomery did not. It was very stable. It just stabilized. So when you're using these sales, and then all of a sudden the market started to increase right there at 17, 18, that's hitting a time period we do in Tacoma Park. Then Tacoma Park now in 2019 is starting to stabilize and go down, but we've already reassessed you.
Ms. Green, sorry, can I just follow up? I'm over here, sorry. Hi,
Oh, sorry.
Miss. So I'm trying to, first of all, thank you very much for coming out tonight. And I guess maybe just to follow up on the questions, I'm trying to follow then why when we look on the map, we have these pockets of such large decreases in the assessed value. That's the part I think we're trying to struggle with. And what
Yeah.
I'm hearing, if I'm hearing correctly, is that when you look at the sales, right, they come in and they were coming in high, and then you started to see some coming in or stabilizing. But the way you're describing it still seems to me, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, that looking at this map, we still should not have seen so many of the assessments go down.
The issue is we don't really look at a map. We just looking at the types of homes. So that's where the problem is coming in. We're looking at types of homes. So let's say you may have an older home that has not been renovated, and there's a whole lot of those in this one little group in this packet. They did not. What sales we got for them was low. Therefore, those values either stabilized or they were not increased that much. Then you have brand new homes, a lot of them. Exactly, but the issue is the older homes surrounding them were coming in, their sales were coming in high. That's the difference. I'm not saying they're not high as the new owner, the new homes, but they were still being sold at a higher price than some of these older ones in the other little areas. As I said, it's pockets. Because when I asked her when we went through the ratio, she looked at this, she said, well, I can only do what we have. We deal with types of construction. You're looking at the overall of this township. We don't look at the township. We only can look at the types of homes. So you got your little 1 stories, your 1.5 stories versus your 2 stories, and then you got your Victorians, and then you have some homes that have dual use. They may have an apartment or 2 in it. Those things were now that's one of the biggest issues, because you had some of these with these dual use with these little apartments in it, and the first thing those homeowners had told us going through is their home is depressed because of the rental, or it's next door to a rental that's like this. So we take all the information we can to do what we can on these properties. We're not like trying to make these different ones higher or lower. We're only going by types. And in each area, there's a type. So then there's certain streets that have problems. We had some areas that had said they was having problems with the land. In other words, the way the property was shaped is either downhill, or they was having a water issue coming in, drainage from this or that. All these things come into play. And they may have from years ago, and then when we take them off, they come in fighting, and we have to put it back. That also will cause some of these prices, some homes be a lower value based on these different functional problems they have in it. And they've been there for years.
So could I ask another, sorry, and I know we have to wrap up, but is there an analysis that can be done looking not at a geographic map in the city, but looking at types of homes and categories that we could get from you all to say, all right, it's a one-story Sears bungalow, and this is the range of assessed values, or it's a, no?
They usually, I don't know, because I know basically the only thing when, I don't have they don't, as far as our programming in the local offices, we don't have the, they don't allow us the rights to go in and do a SQL programming for certain information. I have to go through headquarters to get that type of information. The only information that I can actually literally get out is the sales analysis, which I usually do for the entire area. But as far as to break down to the different type stuff, I will have to go through headquarters to get that, and I just don't have that the rights for that type of ability. I can check into it for you.
Yeah. 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 Cindy, do you want to ask one more question, and then we'll close up? Okay.
And also, I think I also want to thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I know that there'll be individual questions at a time that can't be done here, but you had identified on the phone earlier a way that we can that individuals can follow up and with some of these specific questions, right?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. Thank you for coming out. This is really good above and beyond. I really appreciate it. I would just want to follow up on what people have been saying. So, because I live in one of them, live near both of them actually, I know that two neighborhoods with those small brick rambler types.
Mm-hmm.
So one, everybody went up, and some of them went up a lot. Just a few blocks away in that neighborhood, same type of building, from what I understand, they all went down, and some of them went down a lot. And so it's hard for us to get our minds around why would that be.
It could be because also, like I said, we have auto cycle appeals. Okay, you got to remember, we have an appeal process. So you have people who appealed. Now, this is the issue where you don't actually see. Like I said, a lot of people in Tacoma Park appealed. Now, we have the 3 levels of appeals. When you have a group come in and they appeal, they get to supervisor level, and if they say, well, I didn't like what you have, and we go on to the PTAB level, onto the tax court, we got to now take that into consideration when we reassess. And the thing is, the time period for some of these appeals can be 2 to 3 years. So, as a matter of fact, some of the Tacoma Park area from the 2016 time period, their tax court appeals had just came through, and it was a group. We had to look at that information as we was reassessing in 2019, and that also changed the values on some of these properties. And we had no choice. Tax court, they went to tax court in 2018. I'm reassessing them for 2019, even though the 2018 tax court is for 2016. Do you think I'm going to change their value to increase for 2019 when they just went to tax court for 2018? No, we're going to roll it over, or it may increase very little based on the facts that we received during that tax court time period.
And then that kind of thing might bring one smaller neighborhood down a little.
Than the others, yes.
So, it's not working now. Okay. Again, Ms. Green, and I forgot your last name, I'm sorry, Ava.
McIntyre.
Miss McIntyre. I appreciate it very much that you're here. Ms. Green, I can't believe you're retiring.
Yes, it's time.
We're going to find a way to pick your brain really hard over the next 2 weeks. But for those who don't know, for years, when there have been questions about individual properties and changes in ownership or use of properties, we've worked with Ms. Green, and she's been very helpful. So thank you very much for your service
You're
to the state of Maryland. Appreciate, do you want to talk just a moment about how people can contact you about
Yeah.
specific questions?
Yeah, if you have specific questions, you can even, I'm there until December 1st. Well, actually, I'll be gone till November 27th, because that's basically I'll be gone. But you can contact the office, and you can, my assistant is Steve Filati. So you can still contact our office, the main number, and request to either speak to him, or you can even send an email or written through the mail to him, and he would check into information for you. He's very good. He's very knowledgeable, especially when it comes to the real property. Commercial, you need to talk to Ava Garvey. So, at best, Steve do handle a little bit, but she is the foremost for the commercial division in Montgomery County. So you need to talk to her. She can help you. And if you can't get Steve, you can call Ava. She would get the information for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tacoma Park, because we are rich state